Hi, I'm Samantha Anderson, Director of Communications for Newton Public Schools, and I'm here with Superintendent Van Rankin for our last Board of Education update and Q&A before school starts. Of course, we'll still have some after school starts, but this is your last chance to get your questions in before the first day of school, at least at the district level. We do have another Q&A for Santa Fe students after this one, and then another Q&A for Railer Palooza tomorrow at noon. Just in case you had any questions about everything that's going on tomorrow night at the high school. But we'll get started on this Q&A. One of the biggest talking points, I think it's kind of what everybody expected, was just a review of our COVID updates. Nothing was approved. They'd already made the decision prior, but can you just kind of give parents an idea of what to expect when their students start school later this week?
Well, masks are going to be strongly encouraged. We will encourage employees and students to wear masks regardless of their vaccination status as per the guidelines. It is going to be a personal decision as to whether or not folks do that. So we had some input last night on both sides of that issue from different patrons or staff members. And so I know people have opinions about that. So right now, that's the way it is going to be based upon the conditions, with the exception of, and this is very important for parents to understand, there's a federal regulation as it relates to public transportation that our transportation does fall under. So anybody using school transportation, if we're transporting your students on any of our buses or multi-passenger vehicles, they are, and the drivers are as well, are to be masked. So it's the same regulations that planes, trains, and automobiles that are run by the federal government require. So that's something that we have no choice over. That is a federal regulation. So our expectation is they will wear masks. I know that some folks struggle with that. I get that. You can be angry at us if you like, but I'm just going to say what I said last night at the board meeting. That is not our rule, but we need to comply with that, or we would be have the potential of losing federal funds. Some folks say, well, buck the system, be the trendsetter. We just talked about almost $8 million of federal funds last night through ESSA that we're going to receive. You would, as taxpayers, and I would be the same, be very angry with me or with a school system that decided they wanted to do something like that, and then have to make up those funds that we receive from the federal government. So right now, masks are optional, strongly encouraged as per the language of the Harvey County Health Department and CDC guidance, but the transportation is non-optional. In our school vehicles, if there's more than one person, they are also to be masked. So even our adults within our transportation department, if there's two of them going someplace in a vehicle, both of them are to be masked. So good or bad, that's what it is.
And that includes, because parents may just think to and from school, but if your student's going on like a field trip or, something like that, you'll have to have a mask at school for that bus. Is that right?
Absolutely. Yes. So it's anytime they're on that public transportation service. So, and that falls within the guidelines. We have about 3 pages worth of other types of things that we are going to attempt to do this year. Most of them are similar to last year. Like, for example, with the fever, kids will be sent home for fevers of 100.4 or more. They may return when they have been fever-free for 24 hours with a negative COVID test and without the use of fever-reducing medication, okay? Or 72 hours if no COVID test and without the use of fever-reducing medication. So that's a little bit different than what was done last year. And that, when you look at our document, that's kind of in red to highlight that being somewhat different. So once again, students may return when they have been fever-free for 24 hours with a negative COVID test and without the use of fever-reducing medication, or 72 hours if no COVID test and without the use of fever-reducing medication. And that's a little like what has been done prior to COVID with respect to the flu. I do believe the temperature cutoff with the flu stuff was 101 degrees rather than 100.4. COVID symptoms, there's some changes there a little bit as well. Not in terms of the types of systems or symptoms or number, but what we're having our nurses do is when you look at our number 3, nurses will assess students who present to the health room on a case-by-case basis and make recommendations according to their clinical judgment. A negative COVID test will not be required to return to school if COVID was not suspected when the student was sent home. If COVID was suspected when the student was sent home, that's a bit different. That's a different story. So USD will continue to have heightened awareness of community spread and reinforce the awareness at school. Testing of symptomatic staff or students will be available through USD 373 if the individual does not have access to other testing. So, that's going to be one that I think is going to evolve over time a little. That we'll have to maybe look at making some changes to. But right now, if your kid has had a history like of allergies and things like that, and the nurses are aware of that, they would use that professional judgment to determine whether or not they feel it's COVID related. If they do feel it is that way, we will treat it as a potential COVID case and go through that.
To remind people, we will be doing rapid testing just on a case by case basis, right? We just had a question about that.
We will have it accessible for symptomatic individuals.
With
we won't do rapid testing for asymptomatic individuals. We will have, like for some staff, some surveillance testing available, some PCR testing, but we will have symptomatic testing, antigen testing available. I've had this question several times, so I want to be clear with this as well, that we will get parent permission before we do any asymptomatic testing of students. So that'll be fun to see how that tests or how that tests out, how that plays out. When we look at contacts, close contacts, the rules haven't changed with respect to what the Harvey County Health Department considers a close contact, 6 feet for 10 minutes. But when a person's considered a contact, if they're within 6 feet of a positive case within 2 days from symptom onset or a positive test result, then they're considered that close contact. One thing to remember, or one thing that is different than last year before vaccines, if those individuals are considered a contact, but they are vaccinated and they are asymptomatic, they don't have to quarantine. So once again, any individuals that are eligible for that, 12 or older, if you're considered a close contact, but you've been vaccinated and you are asymptomatic, you're not going to have to be quarantined by the Harvey County Health Department. All right. So that is something that's kind of important to remember. Let's see. It's recommended by the CDC that fully vaccinated people do get tested 3 to 5 days after exposure if they don't have symptoms, but it's not required. So that is a little bit different. We will have the Harvey County Health Department notify parents on all quarantines. If you get a call from them parents, we need you to come and pick up your children. This is one thing that I think we'll probably also have to make adjustments to as we go through over the course of the first 9 weeks, especially with this surge that we're going through right now. If the Harvey County Health Department becomes overwhelmed, we may be actually having to make those calls. Right now, we want them to do that because they have the personnel for that. I will say, parents, if you get those calls from the Harvey County Health Department, please pick them up. Please, we want to keep all of our kids safe. We have to follow their quarantine rules. Or if you get a call from the school that says something similar because the Harvey County Health Department can't get a hold of you, and we've had to pick up that piece, we do need you to pick up your kids because they do need to undergo that quarantine for that time period. It just is what it is. I wish it were different, but that's just the way it has to be. Vaccinations, we're going to continue to offer vaccines. In fact, is it Raiderpalooza tomorrow? There's going to be vaccines available. I believe that's from 4 to 8, I think.
Yeah.
But Sam will talk about that a little bit later. If there's any change in status in terms of what we need to do, we'll do our best to let you know. We are going to continue to clean high-touch surfaces. We're going to continue to reinforce hygiene practices within the school. We're trying to be as normal as possible, knowing with the surge that we have right now, that we may have to make a few changes. The nice thing, we'll have another board meeting in 2 weeks. So if things do change drastically between now and then, we have the ability to make other recommendations that we can put into place. There might be some stuff on quarantines and serial testing with respect to giving asymptomatic, or pardon me, giving symptomatic test, or pardon me, not symptomatic. Let me stop. There will be the possibility of doing what they call serial testing. We're exploring that. I just talked with the Harvey County Health Department today. That is, if you're considered a close contact, your child is, or you are, if you're tested every morning, you as long as you're masked, you can maybe remain in school. So we're going to kind of vet that out a little bit more to make sure we're on the right track with that. So that is another possibility that we'll look at with respect to making recommendations for changes. And if the wheels fall off in terms of cases, our percent positive right now is 5.22%. We've got a little over 50 cases in the county. But if you remember, about 3 weeks ago, we had under 10, and the percent positive was 2 point something. So it is different. I'll plug for the vaccines. Get vaccinated if you can. That's one thing that's going to help us tremendously. So a lot of stuff.
All right. And one other thing that will impact a lot of people is that the budget was talked about last night, and it will be, it's been approved for publication. Can you just kind of just go over just what the next steps are and how that whole process works? So if people do want to know more, they know where to go look and what to do.
Yeah, that there was a change in legislation this past year that requires us to go through a few more steps in order to publish the budget. It was presented last night at the Board of Education meeting. Dr. Decker, if you get a chance, you can listen to his presentation. And the publication, the notice of hearing will go into the paper. It shows a slight increase in the mill levy. And that slight increase is in the mill levy itself is mainly, it is due to the bond indebtedness that we have, in that we will pay off our bonds in 2026. And every year those payments are going up a little bit. So we have to have enough cash reserves to ensure that we can make that payment in that next fall. So when you look at that mill levy rate increase a little bit of about 0.5 mils, when you look at that budget hearing sheet, that is the reason for that. Because obviously in our general fund budget, we only have the authority to issue 20 mils. And with our LOB, we have it at the largest or the highest percentage that our board authorizes. But when you look at that, that is actually a little bit lower in terms of the mill levy, okay, than it was last year. So last year was 13.548. This year it's 13.466. When you look at the bond and interest, last year was 11.282. This year's 11.832. So that's where our increase in mill levy is coming from. There is no increase in the mill levy for the capital outlay because we have that maxed out at 8, and we'll continue to do that for capital projects. One of the things that's different this year is that we have to, if we exceed what they call the revenue neutral rate, which doesn't deal with the mill levy, it deals with the actual amount of revenue we're generating. So every year when you have an increase in assessed valuation, you're going to have then obviously you'll be able to generate more revenue with that same number of mills because your assessed valuation goes up. Okay. That's the fun stuff with budget things that seems real complicated, but it's not too terrible. So when we go to publish the budget, if we have no increase in that revenue neutral rate, then we could have followed what would have been the old guidelines for publishing the budget, and we wouldn't have to publish this revenue neutral rate form. So what's going to happen when we do the actual budget hearing is prior to that hearing, there's going to be a revenue neutral rate hearing. Then that'll be approved. Then we'll end that special hearing. Then we'll go into another special hearing where we do the actual budget. Then we'll end that particular board meeting, and then we'll go into our normal board meeting on the 23rd. So there'll be actually 3 board meetings that we have to do on that night, according to the new legislation that was put into place. So, it's another step, and I understand the reasoning behind it. Sort of. It just creates more hurdles for us to have to jump through, but it's another level of transparency that the legislature thought they needed to put in, and we'll do what we have to do, and that works out pretty well for us.
All right, that sounds like a fun one to try to live stream. That'll be great.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's all the board topics that we were going to cover. So just one last plug, if you have any questions about the board meeting, about this upcoming school year, just leave them in the comment section real quick so you don't miss it. Tomorrow is Regular Palooza. It's labeled as the event you do not want to miss. So obviously you do not want to miss it. It's from 4 to 8-ish. There's a bunch of different components. I'll just run through the schedule real quickly since I have it up. And since you always get to talk. So we have the parent guardian open house, which is from 4 to 6. Now that's important. The teachers are going to start going towards their different club tables and things like that after 6 o'clock. So if when you walk your schedule, you'd like for them to actually be there, make sure you do that between 4 and 6. There's going to be a college, career, sports club, and community booths. So there's going to be a booth for almost anything you can think of. And it's just different opportunities for students and their families to learn about different colleges, careers, all of the different clubs at the high school. And that will be from, I believe, 4 to 6 as well. Food trucks. These are not free, but you will have to pay, but we do have about 5 food trucks, everything from barbecue to a bakery. And they'll be there from 4 to 8, I believe. And then we will have different parent classes. So this is pretty neat. There's going to be a bunch of different parent classes about Infinite Campus, Canvas, and trauma, and just how to work with your student, how to kind of navigate NHS in the front office. And there'll be sessions in English and Spanish, and that information is going to actually be sent out tonight, I believe, if not tomorrow, about where to be. There's a pie auction. You might have heard of it or seen all the videos that the high school has produced. And basically some of our amazing community members have baked a pie and they'll be auctioned off. There's some bragging rights involved. I know people have been working really hard on this, and all the proceeds will go to the Sunshine Club at Newton High School. We'll have COVID vaccinations and meningitis immunizations, Chromebook checkout, and then there is the Stuco Shindig for a student get together, and that's over at 9. So there's a lot going on. We'll have another Q&A tomorrow at noon in case you have any questions about that. That's really all I have. There is another Q&A at 5 at Santa Fe, but Mr. Van Rankin, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, just with respect to Santa Fe, and if you get a chance to participate in that, if not, they're going to be sending out some information. Obviously, we have the exterior of Lindley Hall cordoned off, and so they'll talk about bus drop off and parent drop off, which are going to be on the north side of that building along 7th Street there. So might be a good idea to make sure, look for information if you can't go to that Q&A about how that's going to happen, because that will be in place for some time.
We did post something earlier today on the Santa Fe Facebook page, and they drew a map to kind of show where to go, which was great. And that should be emailed out today or tomorrow as well. So just check out the Facebook page, and it's on their website. So we have it everywhere. But thank you everybody for tuning in. I don't see any new questions. So I'll see everybody in about 7 minutes. And I hope everybody has a great first day of school. It's exciting. And if you want good advice, we did do a fun video with the kindergartners, and they gave their advice for their first day of school. So if you want some, I found it kind of like things I needed to remember in my day-to-day life. So they were very wise for being so young. So anyway, thank you to everybody who tuned in, and thank you, Mr. Van Rankin, for being here.
Have a good day, folks.